It's great to be in your company. Let's hone in on this now. Political analyst Dr Mcebisi Ndletyana has suggested that the Parliament should consider stripping former President Jacob Zuma of his title. Now, this is in light of the umpteenth refusal, if you like, of the former president to appear before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. He argues that Zuma has proven unrepresentative of the office that he once held. Dr. Ndletyana joins us now via our video link for more on his assertions. Doc, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the program. I wouldn't be worth my salt if perhaps I don't begin by asking you on the development of the moment. Yoweri Museveni, we're being told by the Electoral Commission in Uganda, now securing a sixth term in office under, shall I say, a cloud of controversy. What should we make of that?
Well, that is a disgrace. Museveni has been there since 1985, I think it is, has obliterated any form of opposition forces. Even this election was accompanied by a little bit of violence, if not significantly. So you have a dictator here that is pretty much legitimizing this violent rule through a sham of elections. If you don't have free and fair elections, if people are intimidated, they're beaten up, that's obviously not a free and fair election. And Museveni has been there forever. I don't know what he thinks he can still accomplish, really. It's a total disgrace.
Yeah, and I get a sense that, we on the other side of the borders wax lyrical on these type of platforms about how much of an injustice this is. But I'm willing to bet good money, the little that I have, that soon we'll be reacting to statements from the president, even here in South Africa, congratulating the Musevenis of this world. I mean, when it comes to just sheer accountability on the continent, are we even doing near enough to ensure at the very least that the people of Uganda get a democratic ecosystem that actually works?
I think we're not doing enough. There's some progress towards holding, the various countries accountable to the same standards through the peer review measures. However, I don't think we are imposing sufficient sanction where there is a deviation from the norm. We still held up, I think, in the old thinking that people don't want to intervene in other countries' affairs. But I think we have allowed quite a number of our presidents in the continent to get away with murder. There's a lot that remains to be done. I mean, even our next door here in Zimbabwe, that country is really falling apart, and yet you don't get strong, action measures being taken against them. So we still have a long way. Yes, there's some agreement that they have to rule in a particular way. There are certain standards to live by. But the AU has not acted strong enough to ensure that where there is a deviation, there is punishment. So that's why we need to strengthen our efforts.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of deviation and the subsequent punishment, we have you with us for a different but perhaps related reason, right? Former President Jacob Zuma refusing to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. You've now penned an interesting piece that I came across online, suggesting that his actions over the past few months, if not years, actually warrant him being stripped of the status of former president. Perhaps let's begin by understanding what you mean by the status of former president, because the impression I get is that this for you is more than just a title.
Well, it is more than a title. It's an office. It's an office of the former presidency. For instance, former presidents get pretty much the same as current presidents. And they also get all sorts of benefits. They get secretaries, they get protection, they get transportation, all sorts of transportation. The reason that is so is because the money is intended for them to continue to lead a presidential lifestyle, to kind of maintain the dignity of them having been former presidents. So that has to do with their image, right? That they have to maintain these presidential standards. But secondly, there are specific functions that they are meant to execute. These are quasi-presidential functions. For instance, they They are invited by people to make speeches. They also represent government in other forums. So the post, or rather that role, is meant to mimic a presidential role in a way. You are meant to conduct yourself in a presidential manner. That is why you continue to get a salary that is almost similar to the current president, and all sorts of logistical support, because you are supposed to fulfill presidential duties, amongst which are that you have to continue to advance the interest of the republic. You have to uphold the law. So you have to act presidentially. So in this case there's a breach of contract. There's a breach of contract here, because the state provides former President Zuma with all these benefits and a salary in expectation that he will fulfill this presidential role, however previous, but it is presidential nonetheless. So he gets something in expectation that he would fulfill a particular role.
Right, if I can come in there.
Help the current president.
Right.
But he's not doing that. You see, that's the problem. He is acting in defiance of the institution and the laws that is meant to uphold. So that is a breach of, if not contract, at least a breach of convention.
I can imagine some people already pointing out that even this notion of being presidential is not one unanimously agreed upon. We live in an incredibly plural society, for better or for worse. South Africa is very diverse, and we don't have to look very far to find people who will, for whatever reason, believe that the president is in fact being presidential, more so because till this day, there haven't necessarily been, convictions being made against him. Even lawyers now find themselves in a bit of a quagmire in response to his refusal to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, because there is a court case still pending in the Constitutional Court. My point is, as a society, we're not homogenous in how we perceive this. So who decides what being presidential is and isn't?
Very smart point, Ayanda. And of course, people are entitled to their views, but there's only one truth. There's no multiple truths. And there are established ways of getting to their truth. In this case, we know that the office of the ex-president has obligations. That requires the person to act in a dignified and presidential manner, which includes helping to uphold the rule of law. In this case, there are multiple instances where former President Zuma has acted disgracefully, disgraced the office of the presidency. So that's not subject to multiple opinions. It's a fact. So the truth remains that there's a breach of convention insofar as how former presidents are meant to act. And therefore, legitimately, a question must be asked. If someone is given these benefits in expectation of a dignified presidential conduct, and yet that person doesn't do that, why should the state continue to provide that person with those benefits? Because it is a breach of convention. That's the truth. There are no multiple opinions about that.
All right, I'm willing to let that one go. In your piece, you also cite the Former President's Act, 1958 in the United States. And this, in my understanding, is the backdrop upon which you extrapolate what you're sharing with us now. In hindsight, do you think legislation like that could have been better formulated to prevent, I guess, what is now a debate, really? But the impression I'm getting for you is that it shouldn't be something debatable.
Well, it hasn't come up that often. For instance, in the United States, the one notorious figure, Richard Nixon, resigned before he was impeached. Had he been impeached, therefore, he would not have qualified for all sorts of benefits because he would have disgraced himself. So you cannot call someone to represent your country if that person had disgraced himself as president. So we haven't had many cases to use as example. Nonetheless, a case has arisen. When something happens, it is always new. The fact that it hasn't happened doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about it. Otherwise, we'll never progress as society. We have someone here who is acting disgracefully in violation of the office of the presidency. However, we honor this person through benefits. Obviously, that conduct, disgraceful conduct, necessitates that we ask whether we should continue honoring him financially the way we do. That's an important question we need to discuss. It might not have been discussed elsewhere. It has risen now. We have to face it.
I wonder if it goes far enough in addressing what is arguably at the heart of the contention involving the former president, and that is to see that there's accountability and justice. It might appear to actually be an easy escape to impose this punitive measure, if you like, for lack of a better term, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the former president will be held accountable for the string of allegations facing him.
Well, there are several. I almost said two things, but actually there are several. Because former president has, as you know, is quite notorious for all these sorts of violations and a lot of court cases and all that. So those are instances of breaking the law, which he has to answer for. But at the same time, he also has the status of being former president. So I'm dealing with him in the capacity of being former president with clear responsibilities and a clear convention that goes back to the 1950s. So I'm dealing, this matter relates to that. The legal issues, the courts and everything else will still take its course. But for now, I'm saying, is disgraced the office of the president, and therefore we should ask whether I should continue getting the benefits that go with that office.
Interesting you make that distinction, because up till now, you've been citing the legal proceedings, even loosely so, as reasons to why he should be stripped of this title. So pragmatically speaking, can we actually even separate these two things?
Well, there is no law that says he should be, I'm afraid, Ayanda. This is arising for the very first time.
Yeah.
His predecessors have acquainted themselves quite superbly with dignity, honored the office. He is an unbecoming deviation. Hence, I continue to say there is a convention. There's no law that says if a former president does this, therefore this person should be punished. My take is that we treat him the way we do with all these benefits, give him the office, give him the money, pretty much give him state president treatment, because we expect him to behave in a presidential manner that continues to bring dignity to that office. So that's a convention. There's no law that says that. So I'm not really bringing the law in this case. I'm saying actually Parliament would have to think about that. A policy or a law, I don't know, but I'm just saying here is an oddity that has to be pondered upon. What exactly come up beyond our deliberation, I don't know, but it is something nonetheless that warrants deliberating upon.
Absolutely, and hopefully we have people who are keen and have the appetite to sort of wrangle with all those different issues. Thanks very much for your very impactful insights. Certainly appreciate your coming into the program. Political analyst there, Dr Mcebisi Ndletyana. Appreciate your time indeed.